This is an example of an SAT math question that is designed to waste your time. There's a long way to solve this, and if you know one key fact, a short way to solve this. Let's demonstrate. So this is question number 13 from the No Calculator section of the official practice test number 2. It asks us, what is the sum of all values of m that satisfy the equation 2m squared minus 16m plus 8 is equal to 0? Now you might think to yourself, oh, that's great. I'll just factor it. I'll solve for both the solutions and I'll add them together. So my first step might be to divide a 2 onto all of this. And I'd be left with m squared minus 8m plus 4. You get ready to factor. And I would ask myself, what are the factors of 4 that sum to 8? And unfortunately, there aren't any. So I've wasted some time already going down the wrong path. So I'm not going to be able to factor it. And I can't use my calculator to graph it. So I'm going to have to use the quadratic equation, which is fine. So if you recall, the quadratic equation is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if I start plugging these in, negative b becomes a positive 8 plus or minus the square root. B squared is 64 minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 4, all over 2 times a, which is again 1. So now I have 64 minus 16 under the square root sign, and I will continue all over 2. Now I'll have 8 plus or minus the square root of 48 all over 2, and I can factor 48 to 16 times 3 all over 2. The square root of 16 is 4, so I can pull that out. Leave root 3 all over 2. So if I divide by 2, I'm left with 4 plus or minus 2 root 3. So one of my solutions is 4 plus 2 root 3, and I will add that to the second solution, which is 4 minus 2 root 3. These two cancel out, and I'm left with my answer, which is 8. Now, that was the long way to solve the question. The short way to solve the question is simply to memorize that the sum of the solutions of a quadratic equation is negative b over a, which in this case would be a positive 16 over 2, which is equal to 8. I've arrived at the same answer in a fraction of the time. Now, you may be curious about why this is the case, and we can demonstrate that. So, without plugging anything in, we will stay with the quadratic equation. So if I have negative b plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a as my first solution, and I add that to my second solution, which is negative b minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, you will notice that this term and this term cancel out, and I'm left with negative b with plus a negative b, negative 2b over 2a. My 2's cancel out, and I have negative b over a. Now, this is the type of question that shows up fairly frequently on the SAT, but sometimes instead of this exact question, we get a slight variation on it. And they might say instead, what is the product of all the values of m that satisfy an equation? So, if the sum was negative b over a, you must also memorize that the product of the two solutions is c over a. So in this case, that would be 8 over 2 is equal to 4. So 4 is the product of all the values of m that satisfy this equation.
You may be asking why.
Without plugging anything in, I'm going to set up my two solutions. First solution times the second solution. Now this might start to look a little familiar, and if I write it in a slightly different format, it might be more obvious. Do you recognize this? Does it look like something familiar? It should, because this is the difference of two squares. So if I, for example, call this term A and this term B, what we're looking at right now is A plus B times A minus B, which is the difference of two squares. So let's go from this form to this form using our quadratic equation. So I'm going to have negative b over 2a, quantity squared, minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, again, quantity squared. Square both sides, I end up with b squared over 4a squared minus b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Luckily, I have my common denominator already, and this positive will cancel out this negative b. This negative makes this a positive, and I'm left with 4ac over 4a squared. My 4's cancel, one of my a's cancel, and I'm left with c over a. So you don't want to have to go through this whole long mess while you're actually taking the test. Therefore, it's vitally important that you memorize the fact that the product of the two solutions of a quadratic equation is simply c over a.